Welcome to Pints and Politics. I'm your host, Dan Parsons, and as our regular listeners and viewers know, Pints and Politics is all about enjoying a Nebraska craft beer and talking about the most important issues of the day. And we do that today with a couple of folks that an exciting new project. Matthew Hansen, Matt Wynn, welcome to Pints and Politics.
Thanks. Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah. And for our viewers and listeners that have been following along, I should have looked it up, Matthew, but way back in what I call episode 1, you and Sarah, your lovely wife, were kind enough to come on the podcast and talk about your book. Was that like 4 years ago?
I was going to guess 2017.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And yeah, we were talking, the first was the only live episode you did?
We did a few others, but it was the first and most lively of the live editions.
I had 2 beers during that.
Yeah, because you were talking the whole dang time.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we actually did it up here at Fuse, out in the workspace, and yeah, we had a lot of fun. I assume people still stop you on the street and say, "Man, that book was fantastic."
You know, the book had a weird long tail that I think is finally coming to an end. But I mean, it was interesting writing about small towns in Nebraska. Weirdly leads us in some way to this idea we're going to talk about today. So it was a nice precursor to Flatwater Free Press, I think.
I would agree, very much so. Well, let me more formally introduce Matthew Hansen, is executive editor of this new project called Flatwater Free Press. And that's what we've invited you gentlemen on to talk about today. And I'm really, as a journalism student and someone who's dealt with media my entire career, I'm uber excited about what you guys are doing. So we'll talk about that. But let me introduce each of you more formally. Matthew Hansen is the managing editor of the former managing editor for the Buffett Early Childhood Institute. You spent 16 years in newspaper journalism, including 6 as the Metro columnist at Omaha World Herald and co-author of the book, The Better Half, with your spouse, also former World Herald food critic, Sarah Baker Hansen. You are the award-winning state, regional, national for investigative reporting and feature writer and column writing. And in 2015, you were the Great Plains Writer of the Year. You have like a trophy you put on the mantle.
I believe it was a plaque that's in a drawer somewhere. It was a nice honor.
Well, it's a pleasure, Matthew, to have you back. And I've followed your career, and I'm really excited about this project.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And Matt Wynn, who I just met, but as we said, as often happens here in Nebraska, Matt knows my daughter, Gabriella. So there's a plug for Gabriella. And Matt is the executive director of Flatwater Free Press. Matt's background, USA Today, the Omaha World Herald, Arizona Republic. You actually had a short stint as an adjunct professor at Arizona State.
Yeah.
Received your bachelor's degree from the famed University of Missouri Journalism College.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So welcome.
Thank you.
There's some great, and Matt, I was reading your bio a little bit, and you have focused a great deal of your career on data journalism.
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, it was something that I fell back into by way of investigative reporting. That's why I went to school, I went to college to be an investigative reporter. I absolutely wanted to be Bob Woodward when I was 17 years old. I am that kind of nerd.
Nice.
And then I took a wrong turn and I ended up realizing that these people doing something called data journalism were doing way better work than any of these guys over here. So I wandered into the room where this stuff was happening. I said, look, I don't know anything. I would love if you would teach me. On my hands and knees, just show me the ropes. And they did. And it's interesting. What it is if you think about what government does, historically, traditionally, they've created a whole lot of documents and never looked at what they said, right? Yep. And so investigative reporters have made a lot of hay out of requesting piles of documents, going through them and telling us what they say, right? Data is the idea that, well, they stopped putting it all on paper and now you think about government, you fill out a form. You go to a government office, you fill out a form. Those forms get put into a database And that database we can analyze to tell some incredible stories that previously weren't possible about, mortgage loan applications and how Black or Hispanic applicants are less likely to get those loans despite other conditions being equal. About all sorts of things. So data reporting is really accessing that information on its terms and finding out what it says, unlocking its stories.
We'll get more into this, but have you had to coach your editors and publishers about the need for this, or do they recognize it and say, we need Matt Wynn because we need to really dig into some of this?
I think I've had the benefit of coming up at a time when it was a buzzword, so I didn't have to do a lot of that stuff, but I did. Like any journalist, we get pugilistic, right? We want to fight, we want to cause trouble. And I definitely had to talk people into going and fighting those fights. With data, it's very easy to fight 10,000 fights all at the same time. And that can be scarier than really evaluating one fight. So I've had that conversation, yeah.
That's so cool. Well, I'm so excited. I've never worked as a journalist, but like I said,
we have openings.
My whole career, I've heard that. My whole career has been working with journalists, and helping people tell their stories. That's what I've done my whole career.
Cool.
And so I'm really, really, really excited about you guys saving journalism. Well, before we talk about Flatwater Free Press, let's get to the fun stuff. Although that will also be fun. Matthew Hansen asked me what a Nebraska craft beer should we drink? And on your list was a Kincaider beer, which Kincaider has a satellite store just a block away from of here in the Haymarket. But this Kincaider from Broken Bow, Nebraska is the Star Snake Dank IPA. And do you know their story, Matthew? Did you look there? No, of this beer.
No, I don't.
So
it was one I didn't know. I know most of the regular beers, but I didn't know this one.
Yeah. So this is the Kincaider legend has it that in 1967, Herbert Schimmer, a local sheriff, came across a UFO on the crossroads of Highway 6 and 63 outside Ashland. Oh, okay.
And that weirdly equates in some way to a strange form of investigative reporting, which is all those, the FBI did a decades-long sort of, they were taking everybody's like police reports and putting them into the central depository on UFO sightings. And another investigative reporter, data reporter at the World Herald, Cody, actually put on my desk one day, here are all the Nebraska sightings from the 50s. So I never wrote about it, but I looked through them. So I bet I saw that.
Wow, that's perfect.
Story in there.
That is perfect. So this beer is a bright and fresh hopped IPA, like our Star Snake Dank IPA. Pairs well with spicy foods to balance out the heat, and salty foods to counterbalance the taste. So we don't have any food, but I love a good
great.
IPA.
That's great.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Thanks for having
Thanks
us.
for being here. So we will, as we always do, we'll put notes at the end of the show so folks know where to find this tasty Kincaider beer. Yeah, last time.
That is tasty.
Last time we had Kincaider, we'll have to go back and look. Journalism is in trouble. I mean, certainly print journalism is in trouble. And I lament every day the lack of good journalism that is not happening here in Nebraska and other places. And I understand the economics. And so I'm fascinated of what you guys are doing with a free, a nonprofit journalism organization that is going to offer stories for free to other news outlets across the state. So dive in and give me the high level.
Yeah, I mean, no part of this is made up. No part of this is something that we created. This is Nebraska, like so often is the case, we're kind of last in on this nationwide trend. Nonprofit news has been happening since the financial crisis, really, since 2008, 2009. And at that time, there were a couple dozen newsrooms that got together and said, hey, same thing you just said, print journalism is in trouble. We need a way to do these investigations. This work is important. Let's give it a shot with philanthropy. And they did it, and it was 2009, and they stumbled through, and they made some mistakes, and they learned some things.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but so are there some examples, Matt, of other groups that have done that?
Some of those first were ProPublica, Texas Tribune.
Okay, sure.
We more recently, for our feasibility study, we looked at Wyophile in Wyoming, which is actually pretty early. I think they were 2009, 2010.
Okay.
South Dakota Newswatch is 2-3 years old now, but they're around, they're kicking. We talked to the Wisconsin Center for Investigative Reporting, which is another one of those financial crisis outlets. There's 300 of these things around the country.
Okay.
It is not like I can cherry pick a few, but this is out there, this is happening, this is real.
And so tell me the concept, good investigative journalism that you offer for free to other news outlets.
Yeah. And in our case, it's not merely investigative. Investigations are hard to do. They take time. Sometimes you'll spend 6 weeks on a thing and you'll say, I got nothing.
Yep.
Right? And and good investigative journalism is giving you permission to do that. You shouldn't have to come up with something just because you spent time on it. So how do we do that? How do we justify that? In our case, the flip side of that coin, so to speak, is good enterprise. It's the kind of thing that Matthew's done well for a really long time, just telling interesting stories. And in Nebraska, a place this size, there are opportunities. They're out there.
Plenty of opportunities. Matthew, so you guys are close to launching officially, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Here we sit on, this will premiere on Friday, September 3rd. This episode will. So we're a couple days ahead of that.
It should be out by then.
By Friday, September 3rd, your first work will be
three stories will be released by that point. 2 by me and 1 by a freelancer, actually a Lincoln-based freelancer that's working on a story for us right now. So yeah, we are in the final few days. You can see the bags under my eyes right now. I should have put on some makeup before the podcast, but yeah, we are just mere days from launching and working. Matt is working to get it to media partners, so it will show up in people's newspapers and on their TV station and radio station websites across the state of Nebraska.
So are you pitching these stories currently to then, is pitch not the right word?
I mean, it's really we know these people, right? That's what's really fun about this is these are relationships that we've had for years. Yep. We know what they're interested in. We know what they're not interested in. So we are going to do a kind of, fire hose thing to people. Here's the story, use it if you want it, that sort of thing. But to people we think have a particular interest, we're reaching out to them one-on-one. Or in the case of today, I reached out to one editor who, look, these stories are not necessarily geographically in his wheelhouse, but I think if they're interested, it's the kind of thing where they could have it reported, do a little work and localize them so that they do fit for their audience.
Okay.
Because I think the topics interest, that sort of thing. So we're really, building the plane as we fly, so to speak.
Well, one of the really successful things that's happened in other states, and South Dakota is a good example, where pretty quickly basically every daily newspaper in the state of South Dakota was running all of their stories on their websites or in their physical newspaper. So it doesn't, if done right, and fingers crossed it'll work that same way for us, this will be a thing that pretty quickly will, have statewide distribution. Not through, we'll distribute ourselves as with a newsletter and social media, but it will have distribution in these traditional media outlets.
What do they need? Do those news? Okay, so in not just print journalism, print publications, but you're offering this to broadcast as well, and so then they can take it and adapt it to their formats. Is that the concept?
And we're willing to work with them too. One thing that's been on the table for a long time is Matthew did these 2 stories. He's great on camera. You can have him on and he'll do an interview for 2 or 3 minutes about the work that he did, right? A CNN style interview or Fox News style interview.
Nice.
Same goes for radios. Anything is on the table. I've been telling people we want to get weird with our content, and that's probably the least weird thing we can do.
So describe a little bit your roles. Executive editor,
He's the boss.
He's the boss. Executive editor, and your title is?
No, he's the. Go ahead.
I'm the executive director.
Executive director.
And I'm actually the executive director of the Nebraska Journalism Trust. The Flatwater Free Press is a project that we do, and Matthew is the editor of that. He is the boss of that.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So you have some stories already teed up, and you're hiring. You mentioned that you're in a hiring mode. How many freelancers do you hope to
Yeah, the plan, it's kind of a 2-track thing. On one end, those investigative projects stuff, we're hiring at the start 2 or 3 full-time reporters. We have interviews set up tomorrow for some of these people. We're hopeful that within a couple weeks we have some people hired for those full-time reporting roles. And then on the other track is this freelance track that is much more feature stories, profiles of interesting people doing cool stuff in small towns, more of those better half stories, like from the book. And we've really started, we probably have right now 10 or 12 of those stories assigned, kind of in the works. The first one is going to come out on September 1st. And then every week we'll have another one of those stories that will roll out, including, and I'm not going to tell you who, including some recognizable names, people who are recognizable from their past in journalism who are going to be freelancing for us.
Nice.
So that's really exciting too.
Well, there's folks available for work, right? There's journalists.
And this is an appealing, we built these jobs and these freelance jobs to be appealing to people like us, right? This is fun. This is why you got in this is all the bullshit to the side. This is why you got in the business in the first place.
Yeah.
Can you curse on Pints and Politics?
You damn right.
I just did.
Yeah, the little Apple thing, it's clicked explicit. So I don't know that we
beer drinking.
Yeah, it all fits together.
See, that's why I thought it was okay. It's the beer. It threw me off.
So talk a little bit about the structure of the organization and how it's set up, and some of your funders, and how does that look like?
That sounds like a me question, I guess. Yeah. So, like I said, we have the Nebraska Journalism Trust, and that's kind of our corporate identity.
Okay.
We are, we're pursuing 501c3 designation.
Okay.
Currently, we're under fiduciary with the Nebraska Community Foundation.
Yep.
Our goal is to, tell the stories of this state, to tell interesting stories, to find truth, and to represent all voices. That's what we do. I have a long-term dream for the Nebraska Journalism Trust, which is basically the Flatwater Free Press is the first drop in the bucket, that more flowers will bloom where this one does. There's many approaches to doing journalism. Someone else is going to have an idea, someone else is going to be able to do it, and we will completely lower the bar for them to do so. They won't have to worry about getting a lawyer to get whatever. Just if you can raise some money, come under our umbrella, and you can do that work. Flatwater Free Press is our first baby, right? It's the first thing that we want to make that happen with.
Awesome.
And what about funding? If I can.
Oh, I'm
yes,
sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Follow-up question.
We went after 7 foundational, in every sense of the word, sources for getting up and running, for giving us the leeway for us to quit our jobs and make this work. The White's Family Foundation has been fantastic. They gave us a matching grant that we are eager to match as soon as possible. Sherwood is there. Logier is there. The Mammoth Family Foundation. Nebraska Community Foundation was available for not only fiduciary, but they also put a little bit of money behind this. The Platt Institute is there for some funding as well. And then the Good Words Foundation, which is actually in New York, but it's a former graduate from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
So Platt Institute, interesting, a public policy think tank. Any potential conflict that you might need to report on?
Where we overlap with Platt is extraordinarily clear. Jim Vogel is honest in what is interesting, and he's right in what is interesting.
Yeah.
Transparency and making government open to everybody is something where journalists and anybody can agree.
Yeah.
And that's where we've really found common ground with them. But I would also say we're as likely to have conflict with them as we are any of these other funders.
Sure. Yeah. If there's a conflict, if all of a sudden there's a newsworthy story with one of your funders, then you're going to you'll go after that story.
Yeah. I've got a lot of hard questions about Platt Institute, but I'm not worried about that at all.
Well, for what it's worth, as certainly Matthew knows my background, and maybe Matt does too. My background in politics in the state, from my perspective, the Platt Institute has become less political in recent years. They become truly more of a think tank. There was a time, I think, when they were seen as maybe a little bit more biased and political. But anyway, Jim's done a great job over there
Yeah.
of truly being a think tank and discovering from an economic standpoint what's important in the state.
One of the cool things that's already happening, even though we haven't really started it yet on the funding side, is that people are hearing about this idea, and it's kind of hard to figure out right now, although we can tell you how to do it if you want to. But they're giving us money. And I remember the first couple donations we got from just, regular Joes out there. And it just, I don't know, it was a moment that was really, really important, I think, to both Matt and I. Like, somebody decided to take $20 or $50 or $100 of their hard-earned money and give it to this idea. I mean, the foundation stuff is obviously super important, and it's the reason why we're here to start. But in some way, that just it made it feel more real to me. Like, we are going to try to knock it out of the park for those people, and for people who just want to read it too. It's not like we only care about the funders, but it just makes it, over time, it's going to grow into a thing that's going to have a bunch of those people who are going to power this thing.
Well, if people care about this state and they care about their institutions being challenged, whether it's the university or state government or even local entities, if people care about those organizations, those entities to be healthy and thrive, journalism is the key to that.
Right. I mean, to the point where it's cliche, but I feel like it's true. Investigations are about making sure our systems work.
Yep.
It's not about anything aside from that. It's about kind of the highest ideals of a society. Everyone can get behind that.
It's not gotcha journalism. It's not sensational gotcha journalism. This is true reporting and investigative journalism.
Right. The point of the project is to get below that surface level of journalism. And there's something to be said for, and I think in the state of Nebraska, there still is a lot of good daily journalism. And we are purposefully not doing that, right? In part because it already exists, especially in Lincoln and Omaha. There's certainly fewer reporters now than there used to be. But, if you want to know what happened in the Lincoln City Council, the Omaha City Council, or in the legislature, you can follow that daily journalism in existing media outlets. What we want to do is dig way below the surface and find stuff that the existing media outlets don't have the time or the resources to do, and decoupling it from the for-profit model. I mean, investigative journalism makes no sense in the for-profit model. I mean, if you think about what this is, like what Matt said earlier, we might work on something for 6 weeks and then throw it away. Like, it might take 4 months to get a good project done. And at the end, it's not going to get as many eyeballs as a Husker football practice story. So it makes a lot of sense to turn it into a thing where you say, if people think this is important, this work, then, they can, be a monthly donor to this thing, and we're going to produce this important work.
So we've talked about the appetite for other news outlets to expand their reach, expand their professional journalism by partnering with you. What about the readers and viewers and listeners? Is there an appetite? Is there still an appetite in this digital age for the consumer for this project?
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, we have had...
there is still hope.
Every baseline that we set up for success on regular people, we blew by. We had a goal by the end of the year that we have quadrupled. We quadrupled it within the first...
As far as newsletter subscribers.
Right.
Nice.
In terms of donors, I mean, and again, we haven't advertised this. We haven't
I was going to say, it's just kind of word of mouth, right?
So yeah, people care. Of course they care.
They care about this state, and they care about their institutions, and they do want... I'm just really thrilled about the whole concept. Talk a little bit... so Matthew... Matt mentioned, Matthew, your photography skills. Are you also, what about video or?
Yeah, to start, our full-time employees are going to be kind of reporters first, although we're certainly interested in multimedia experience as a part of that job if the reporters do have it. But, we're, as a part of our freelance budget, we're really focused on photography, videography, and actually we've partnered on these first stories. That my first project that I'm working on is about, and it'll be out by the time this airs, so I can talk about it. But it's about, you keep hearing about, or I kept hearing about, on the ground vaccination, where, like, this idea of door to door, this idea of how are we going to get to, how are we going to take the population from half vaccinated to 70% vaccinated or whatever. And so I went to South Omaha and spent a lot of time there where these efforts are actually happening.
Nice.
In a very, and then I, focus on some other areas where they're not. There's not the level of success. But a Lincoln-based photographer and videographer, Jazari Kowal, came with me and, shot video and took photos for that project. So he's a person that we're definitely going to be working with. And I mean, there's many more, including, a lot of photographers with Journal Star, World Herald experience that we would love to work with in the coming days.
That's so cool. So are reporters starting to come to you to say, you said you're doing interviews yet this week. Are you finding the talent that you need?
I mean, Matthew already mentioned our first kind of stop and look at each other and say, this is really happening moment with the regular folk donations coming in. The other kind of shocking moment was when the applications started coming in and these people were to a T, more educated. Their clips are impressive. They are, if we could have drawn up exactly the folks we wanted to apply, we got them.
Local, regional, national?
National. And in a way that is really, really, it is so refreshing to see the passion of kind of the, there's people who have very little experience in our crew, and there's people who have some experience, but they are, to almost a person, they just have what excites us about journalism, and it's curiosity, it's passion, it's the idea of wanting to dig into stories, it's the idea of thinking that this work is important and wanting to do it for the right reasons. And it has been, Matt's right, it's been another example where we feel, I think, very, very, I feel very, very fortunate to be in a position where we're seeing this happen, and we know that it's going to grow because we're going to hire good people. It's going to grow in a successful way.
Is this the future of journalism? What's going to happen? I wake up often thinking those 2 dead tree newspapers I get delivered to my doorstep every morning. Am I truly going to be the last one that has that? Is this the future of journalism?
I mean, I think some of the broader, I don't know what the future of journalism is. I know where we are now and what is needed now, and this is it. But I do think that we have the infrastructure in place for whatever may come. I mean, really, the only thing that I know for sure is I have no idea. And with the Nebraska Journalism Trust, the way that's set up, it is meant to be kind of nimble and flexible and deal with whatever comes.
Yep. I mean, certainly the future of journalism is not print.
Right? And
I would presume that it's not print, that it's going to move, more digital. And obviously, we're not printing very purposefully, not printing a publication, although we are obviously going to part with a lot of people who do. But yeah, the part of the future of journalism is definitely this nonprofit model.
Has to be.
Yeah, and it always, when you think back, like, it always has been. It's just like people don't necessarily equate NET or PBS to, but there are similarities here that are born in kind of the 20th century vision of our democracy. Yep. And those places are great, and they are in a lot of cases thriving. So it's not a new idea necessarily, but it's an idea that for sure is going to continue to grow in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that I would bet some money right now that in 10 years you've got a Flatwater Free Press analog in Hastings, in North Platte, that there are people who are going to cover their community as that need becomes more clear. Right now, like we were talking about, we actually have some level of, decent daily reporting. I mean, in some cases, really impressive daily reporting happening. We're lucky. That's not everywhere, and that needs to become clear. And I do think this is the path forward for those places to cover themselves.
Has to be. It just has to be. I'm so excited about what you guys are doing. Okay, so how do I make a donation? How do our viewers and listeners make a donation? How do we consume the
How much cash do you have on you?
I left my wallet in the car, Matthew. So I'm paying in beer today. How can we help, and how can we consume the news that you're creating?
I'll take this one at a time. Sign up for our newsletter. I mean, that's the very first thing you can do. And you can do that by going to our website, which is flatwaterfreepress.org.
Okay.
And we will. It's an easy button to, just one thing you have to fill out, and you're going to get our weekly email newsletter where we're going to put all our journalism. We're also going to put in there, and we've already started this, journalism that we're reading from around the state. We're going to hold up, when there's a good thing in the Kearney Hub, you are also going to be able to see it in this newsletter. Follow us on social media. Those are the two main ways to kind of follow along. But as far as donation goes, like Matt mentioned, it's through the Nebraska Community Foundation right now, but it's right on that same website. Click the donate button. It'll take you to the Nebraska Community Foundation page for us. And like we said, people have been giving. We really have not publicized even how to do it, and people have already been giving money to it. We will certainly start asking for money at some point, but that's the way you can do it right now. Is just go to our website and you can figure it out.
Because as a consumer, I don't have to pay to consume this news.
No.
But out of the goodness of wanting good journalism in this state, hopefully more and more of people will recognize this is necessary. Well, guys, thank you so much. It's been a delight to have this relatively short conversation. We didn't even finish our beers. Look at this.
You have to tape another episode.
That's exactly right. But let me just take a moment to thank our hosts, the Nebraska Horsemen, Nebraska Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association, Warhorse Gaming, production, editing, and distribution by BCOM Solutions, Kim Remington, Operations Manager at Parsons Public Relations. You may be hearing some theme music, Pints and Politics theme music written and performed by Jack Rodenberg, a very well-known Lincoln name. Thank you to Fuse Co-working, our home of Parsons Public Relations, and our guests, Matthew Hansen and Matt Wynn. Gentlemen, thanks so much for what you're doing.
Thanks.
Saving journalism for us.
No pressure.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks a lot.